Hello and welcome to another episode of the True Crime Cocktail Hour on Friday evenings. On Fridays, we like to sit down after a tough week of work. We have a drink together, and as long as we're here, I might as well tell you about a mysterious true crime case. On today's episode of the True Crime Cocktail Hour, 6th of October 2010. The first episode of the new season of Vista, a TV show similar to the America's Most Wanted, is live on Italian television. And of course, it's about the very current case of Sarah Scazzi, a 15-year-old girl who disappeared on the 26th of August 2010 from her small hometown Aventrana in the south of Italy and still had not been found. Sarah's mother is also on the TV show. And then the unbelievable thing happened. The host got a message over a headset. And then live on television, she told Sarah's mother that her daughter had been found murdered. Aventrana in the south of Italy is a very small, dreamy village with about 6,000 residents. The people living there live a simple and quiet life. Rumors and gossip spread quickly though. And in the middle of it all, Sarah Scazzi. She was born in 1995 as the youngest of two children. Her mother, Concetta Serrano, and her father, Giacomo Scazzi, were separated. And back then they had decided that Sara should stay with her mother in Aventrana, while her father, Giacomo, moved to Milan for work. Sarah had a very good relationship with her father, despite not seeing him that often since he moved to Milan. Her relationship with her mother, it was difficult though. Because Concetta, Sarah's mother, she was one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Deeply religious woman. She was so deep in, you can't even see her anymore. Jesus here and Jesus there. Just to give you an idea, Sara and her brother were not even allowed to have birthday parties because celebrating your birthday, according to the Jehovah's Witnesses, was an act of self-praising, and only Jesus was allowed that privilege, right? Not me, not you, Brenda, Jesus only. And this is why Sara would spend most of her time at her aunt's Cosima's house. Cosima, she was Concetta's sister, and she wasn't as religious at all. And she and her husband Michele treated Sara like their own daughter. Cosima and Michele, however, also had two daughters of their own, Valentina and Sabrina. Sabrina was 7 years older than Sara, and the two basically grew up together, and they were like best friends. They were cousin best friends. They were always together. Sabrina also brought Sara into her circle of friends. These friends were the same age as Sabrina, so Sara would be the youngest by far. You know, most of the friends were like in their early 20s. But Sara loved this because it gave her a sense of security. At the same time, it also made her quite vulnerable, quite easy to get access to, quite easy to manipulate, you know what I'm saying. But Sara, she had an amazing time. At her aunt's house, she could experience love and acceptance, and then with Sabrina and her friends, she could experience like security, life itself, and she just had fun. But the fun ended on the 26th of August 2010. Sara was on her way to Sabrina's, and together they wanted to spend the day at the beach. Sara left her house at around 1:30 p.m. or 2:30 p.m. The sources vary on that, but she never made it to Sabrina's house. She vanished into thin air. They tried to call her on the cell phone, but her phone was off. Sabrina then got in her car and drove through the streets of Aventrana trying to find Sara. But there was no trace of Sara. Merely a couple of hours later, everyone in town heard about the missing girl. The police was everywhere looking for her. Scuba divers were sent down every lake or every watering hole Aventrana had to offer. The sound of helicopters scanning the area for Sara could not be overheard. But no one was able to find her. Sabrina was devastated by her cousin's disappearance, and she did everything she could to get her back. She gave interviews, she talked to the media a lot, she had posters and t-shirts printed, she had organized a vigilance, so the entire town, with like torches in their hand, they were walking through the streets, find Sarah Scazzi. But the days passed without a trace of Sara, and one began to wonder, was she kidnapped or did she run away? Now, the she did run away theory is actually not that far-fetched, because Sara made no secret out of the fact that she wanted to get out of Aventrana ASAP, because there was nothing really that was holding her there. There were people who said that she once mentioned that Aventrana felt like a prison to her. She wanted to see the world, make new friends, build a career. And here in Aventrana, she had her mother, who was more interested in religion than her own daughter. Her father was like 620 miles away, and Aventrana was a small and boring little village to her, and she wanted to get out. And then there was a rumor that her father, Giacomo, had something to do with it, because Giacomo, he had a criminal past, let's just say. I couldn't find any details about that, but it just said that he shook hands with the one or another shady character, if you know what I mean. And people were wondering if one of these shady characters had taken Sara, but no evidence for that theory was ever presented. But there was one thing investigators were almost 100% certain about. They were certain that the family was somehow involved. Somebody of the family was involved. If it was not the father, then it was somebody else. Because no one knew that Sara was about to leave her house and go over to Sabrina's, other than Sara's mother, Sabrina, a friend of Sabrina's, and Sabrina's parents, Michele and Cosima. So a couple of days after her disappearance, Sabrina showed up at Concetta's house and asked for Sara's diaries. Maybe there was something in there to work with, something that gave him a hint, for example, if she had plans to in fact run away. So Sabrina, she read through all the diary entries, right? And they contained some very concerning things. Because according to the diary entries, Sara over here had a little flirt, like a lover. And it was a man that Sabrina knew very well, because it was one of her friends. It was a man named Ivano Russo. That wouldn't actually be like a bad thing. Unfortunately, though, Sabrina was also kind of in love with Ivano Russo, and she feared that this hot little information would give investigators the wrong idea. So she decided to keep the diaries to herself. It will last weeks until the police finally got their hands on these diaries. But 1 month after her disappearance, there was some movement in the case. Sara's phone was found in an abandoned field in Lecce, which is another small town east of Aventrana, and it became clear that something had indeed happened to her and that she did not run away, because somebody had removed the battery, the SIM card, and the phone was partially burnt. What's even more mysterious about the finding of the phone is, however, out of all people in this small town, Sara's uncle was the one who found the phone, Michele Miseri. And people found it very suspicious that her uncle, out of all people, found the phone in a town 1 hour away on some abandoned field in the middle of nowhere. Consequently, Michele was now a suspect, and he didn't take it very well. Let's just say that. He became really, really depressed over it all. In his defense, a lot of people couldn't believe that he was actually able to commit such a horrific crime. He was never even close to be considered a suspect. He was always more in the background. He was a very quiet man, very calm character, very minimalistic, and also a very devoted and hard worker. Up to 14 hours he would spend out there on his fields. And now he committed this horrific crime. It was unbelievable to some people. So because of these recent developments, investigators really wanted to talk to Michele, hear what he had to say. Although the journalists, the media, they were faster. Because you see, ever since Sara's disappearance, camera teams, reporters, journalists were camping outside of Sabrina's and Cosima's and Michele's home day in, day out. But now that Michele was also a suspect, things got way worse and he just couldn't evade the media anymore. Where was he gonna go? So then one day, Michele comes home from the field, from work, right? And a reporter is standing in front of his house and starts asking these random questions. And even surprising to this reporter, Michele just starts talking. It's not a confession or anything. He just talks about how he really accidentally found the phone. And he kept saying that over and over again. And then he was like, I have nothing to hide. Here is my house, here is my garage. Come on in. Look at things. I have nothing to hide. So he opens the garage door. And just when the reporter and Michele were about to enter this garage, Michele's wife, Cosima, suddenly showed up out of nowhere. And she very firmly, in front of the cameras, told her husband to shut the fuck up. And she closed the garage door, like very quickly, after forcing her husband inside. It was a very, very strange scene. And then the 6th of October 2010 came around. Sara still had not been found. Now, to the producers of Kila Vista, this case was just perfect for the opening of this season, because this case was a media spectacle, and they were hoping for high audience numbers. So Sara's mother is there live on air, and the host just talks to Sara's mother about the case itself and about recent developments. And then all of a sudden, the host gets a message over her headset. A message that would change everything. But see for yourself.
Every parent's worst nightmare played out live on national television. The presenter of a missing persons show informs a mother of news reports coming in that her daughter's body may have been found. Aware of the gravity of the breaking news, the mother is asked if she understands what is happening and whether she wants to continue. Concetta Serrano sits in silence as official confirmation is sought from the police. That comes in the form of a phone call from investigators. Concetta says she's been told that a corpse has been found. Shocked, she says that's absurd, right?
But how did they find the body? And where did they find it? Now, in order to understand this, we have to go back a couple of hours. So a couple of hours before Kila Vista was about to air live on TV, Michele Miseri was led into an interrogation room and questioned. The interrogation officers, they didn't really think that he had something to do with her disappearance, but they felt like that he knew more, that he was keeping something from them. And also they were quite sure that Michele was this close to cracking. And so they do what they do oftentimes. They pretend that they are your friend, and they build trust, and they pretend that they know that you know something, or they know that you committed the murder, and then they say things like, you know what, buddy, just get it off your chest. You will feel better. Just tell us what happened. We can help you. And they did the same effing thing with Michele Miseri. And at some point, they were like, hey man, if you don't want to tell us anything, that's fine. But do us one favor. Just at least tell us where her body is. So Michele, he looks up, and he's staring at the crucifix on the opposite side of the wall. And then he suddenly says, her body is in Moscow. I know. Crazy, huh? It gets crazier. Moscow is actually a street name. But Michele's old childhood home was standing in that street. It was now an abandoned farmhouse, but according to Michele, Sara's body was buried somewhere on the property. So they throw Michele in a car, and they keep going, and they're driving through this property for Michele to show them where Sara is buried. Michele, the entire car ride, is absolutely beside himself, all right? The entire car ride, he's like, faster, faster, we need to go faster. And the investigator who's sitting next to me is like, what's the hurry, man? She's not going anywhere. I think you took care of that. And it takes a lot to creep me out, honey. But Michele, he was sitting there, he was like, officer, You don't know how bad it is. She haunts me in my dreams every night. Every night she asks me, what are you waiting for, uncle? When are you gonna get me out of here? God. So they get to the property and Michele gets out of the car and he starts walking and he keeps walking. And then eventually he stops at a large stone. So they pull it aside and Michele kneels down and with his bare hands starts digging. And really, after some time, the upper end of a well comes to light, and they find Sarah's naked body in there. Michele Miseri gave a full confession that night, and it left everybody in shock. No one could believe that this quiet, devoted, hardworking man was able to commit such a horrific crime. So, according to Michele, this is what happened. He was working in his garage on his truck that was broken, and then Sarah came into the garage, and he actually didn't notice her until she was standing like right next to him. And then he said to investigators, "Something came over me. I wasn't myself that day." Maybe it was because, his words, not mine. Maybe it was because of her clothes. Maybe it was because my truck wasn't working. And then when Sarah turned around to leave the garage again, he took a rope and put it around her neck like 2 times. And he pulled and pulled and he ended up strangling her to death. He then put Sarah's dead body into the trunk of his car. He drove all the way to this abandoned property. He raped her dead body and then threw her into the well. First of all, ew. Second of all, as these gruesome details of this horrific crime were revealed to the public, a lot of people asked for the death penalty. They were screaming for his blood. And then at the same time, a lot of people were arguing whether he could really be held responsible because, bad childhood, hard labor, dominant wife, and due to the fact that he not only found the phone, but was most likely the one who put it there in the first place, many people considered that to be like a cry for help, like he wanted to get caught. Now, before you click out because you think this case is over, hold your horses. Because it would not be an episode of the True Crime Cocktail Hour if there wasn't a major plot twist in the cases. And a major effing plot twist is about to hit ya. Michele Miseri is not the murderer. At least he wasn't convicted for it. But people at that point thought he was guilty. He confessed. He is guilty. He did it. He's the murderer. And after his arrest, the town went crazy. It changed the town forever. Sabrina, devastated. Especially after her dad's confession of rape and murder, she pretty much isolated herself in the house. And a lot of people in Aventrana, they became really, really hostile. And it turned against the whole family. So up to this point, there were reporters and journalists and media teams in front of the house day in and day out, as it is. But now, after Michele's arrest, it was crazy. And not only were reporters and media teams waiting in front of the house, no, but also a lot of bystanders and onlookers. And these people really were the worst. This house became a tourist attraction. I'm not kidding you, okay? There are reports about people posing in front of this garage, taking selfies. There have been reports about parents posing their children in front of the garage, like, hey children, listen, we want a nice family picture, so get closer together. Remember, this is the garage where the girl got murdered, and now smile. However, after the prosecution began to build a case against Michele Miseri, the first doubts about his guilt rose up. First of all, Sarah's body, when they found it, it was decomposed to a state where the sexual abuse could not be proven anymore. More importantly, it was noticed that Michele Miseri made specific statements when it came to the disposal of the body, but made contradictory statements about the murder itself. Especially after they took him to the garage and his abandoned childhood home for a reconstruction of the crime. And after the reconstruction, they brought him back to the police station because they wanted to confront him about these contradictory statements. And then another unbelievable thing happened. After Michele Miseri was taken to this police office, Sabrina, his daughter, and her attorney showed up at said police station. They confronted Michele about his contradictory statements, and they felt like that he was protecting somebody. And Michele's attorney, he also had hired a forensic psychologist, and she sat down with Michele, and after that she was like, hey, I got nothing. I don't think he's guilty, man. He was there when they got rid of the body, that's what they knew for sure. But they thought there's more to this story, things we don't know yet. And then Michele confessed that he did help dispose of the body, but that he was not the murderer. At the time of the murder, he was out on his front porch taking a nap when suddenly somebody woke him up. And when he opened his eyes and looked up, his daughter Sabrina was standing in front of him, and she asked him to follow her into the garage. So he did that, only to find Sara's dead body lying on the floor, strangled with a belt. And Sabrina, all beside herself, asked her dad to help her get rid of the body, to which Michele apparently said, oh, I always have to do your dirty work. But he was devoted, and he loved his family and his daughter, and he would do anything for her. But then Cosima, his wife, she got wind of what happened, and together with her daughter, she had, allegedly, forced Michele to confess to the murder. But why would Sabrina kill her beloved cousin? Well, actually, there are several theories, depending on who you ask. So Michele has his own theory, and he told investigators that he had once touched Sara inappropriately, and that she was now out and about in Aventrana telling people about it. And Sabrina feared that it would ruin the entire family, and she wanted to teach Sara a lesson. That's Michele's theory. But maybe it also had something to do with Sara's diary entries, remember? So police, they now had access to the diary entries. And here's the thing. Remember Ivano Russo, Sabrina's friend? So Sara and Ivano, they actually, it seemed they had a flirt, right? But actually, Sabrina and Ivano were kind of like friends with benefits. But Ivano always kept Sabrina at a distance because he wanted to not put the friendship in jeopardy. Yeah, right. But at the same time, he also showed interest in Sara. Paid a little bit more attention to her, too much attention for Sabrina, really. Oh, sweet jealousy. And mind you, this whole love triangle, Sabrina, Sara, and Ivano, was the topic in the diaries. There was nothing else. There was no hint on that she wanted to run away. There was no hint for any kind of sexual assault from her uncle or anyone, really. Nothing. It was all about Sabrina and Ivano and her. So Sabrina was arrested and Michele was released 3 days later. And then all of a sudden, he changed his story again and he went back to version number 1. Now his daughter was completely innocent and Michele was actually the murderer. Michele said that he was pressured by his attorney and his forensic psychiatrist to say that it was his daughter. So they made false promises if he handed her over to the police. And then it got even more crazier and more confusing. And it all started with a flower shop employee. So this flower shop employee, she went up to police and she told them that her boss had witnessed something very interesting and had told her about it. So according to this flower shop owner, he was, at the day of Sarah's disappearance, he was out there in his truck making a delivery. And when he stopped at a red light, he looked across the street and he spotted Sara coming from Sabrina's house. And then all of a sudden, a blue-gray Opel Astra showed up. Sabrina was the one driving the car. But Cosima, her own mother, was in the passenger seat. And Cosima got out. She grabbed Sara by the arm and she forced her into the car. And it actually made sense to investigators because they couldn't believe in the first place that Sabrina acted on her own. There had to be somebody else. And apparently, it was her own effing mother. And Cosima Miseri was also arrested and just like her daughter, was accused of murder. Now the prosecution, they interviewed this flower shop owner and they had him sign the witness report, which he did. And it was the evidence, the the basis on which the prosecution stood on. But when this flower shop owner realized that the prosecution was actively building a case against the two of them based on his witness reports, he was suddenly like, whoa, everybody calm down, hold on. I dreamt that. It was a dream. Hey, I was dreaming. It was nothing. Although the witness report never mentioned the word dream like once. And this flower shop owner, he openly said that it was a dream. And that would take away the evidence of the prosecution. So the prosecution actually went and sued this flower shop owner because they now thought he was lying. That it was not a dream, that it really much did happen. Whole lot of back and forth. Anyway, this witness report was accepted as evidence in court. The case against Cosima Miseri and Sabrina Miseri began on the 10th of January 2012. Michele just had to stand trial for the disposal of the body. He also served as a witness in the trial of his wife and his daughter, and again in front of everybody in the court, the judges, the jury, everybody. He again said that he was the murderer and that the two of them were innocent. But Michele, I'm sorry, man, but I watched interviews with him. He changes his story all of the time. And people were just sick of it. They had it, I guess, and no one really believed him anymore. So despite all of his efforts, and after 4 days of deliberation, Cosima Miseri and Sabrina Miseri were found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. The two of them filed for an appeal, which was granted, but the verdict was confirmed. And then they moved this whole case to Strasbourg? Is that how you say it? You know what I mean. To the European Court of Human Rights and filed for an appeal there. And even there, the verdict was confirmed. But still, this case really reminds me of the Amanda Knox case. Do you get that vibe too? You know, something's up with Italian law. I don't know what it is. I'm sorry, it's kind of unsatisfying. It's an unsatisfying end. I'm so sorry, I know. Just know this next week's case is definitely solved. I'm just gonna tell you that. And speaking of that, that was the end of the story, at least so far. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and let me know what you think down below in the comment section also, if you want, of course. You can press that subscribe button. It would really, really make my day. And what can I say? If you don't have any plans next Friday, you know where to find me. I'm right here with another cocktail, and if you want a mysterious true crime case.